today the subject of discussion, sharing, is relationships, human and divine. And this is in different ways. One, of course, our relationship with our fellow human beings or with the entire world around us, really. And also a relationship with the divine, but also in another aspect, how our relationship, human relationships, can help us as a window to see the divine, and how our relationship with the divine can help us in our day-to-day relationships as well. I think all of you are aware that Jyotish and Devi just celebrated their 50th year anniversary. And some people may say, oh my God, you survived 50 years. But actually, what we have seen is that in Jyotish and Devi, we have a wonderful example of what it means for a relationship really to flourish. That we've seen that how their mutual love and how they're able to share that love just keeps growing with time. It's not a drag. And it's a very wonderful example for many of us that, certainly we are not anywhere close to our 50 years. But I think even if you are not with a partner, you will find great inspiration on how they are able to just walk through life and share that divine love with all.
And again, also, they just celebrated in Ananda Village, and we have some beautiful recordings available through Ananda worldwide on the YouTube. So if you haven't watched that, we'll also share the links later. Some of us have been tuning in and enjoying that very, very much. And yes, and hope this is to be the India celebration of your 50th anniversary. So we have some questions, hopefully, that can be added on to the audience here. Yeah. So with that, we invite you to maybe get us started, and then we'll have some questions.
Yes, as you were saying, we had our 50th anniversary, and we celebrated here at Ananda Village with our spiritual family. It was very informal, a lot of fun, not so much teaching as it was just sharing the joy of spiritual family. And it really felt more like a celebration of spiritual family than it did the anniversary of two individuals. And so it is a joy. Shamini, you were right about how the relationship grows over time when it's rooted in God and in positive values and in service, because then God's light flows through us. Whether you're in a marriage or a partnership, everybody's in relationship. We can't avoid it. In fact, the whole universe itself, the manifestation, is because God wanted to relate to himself and herself. It's beyond gender at that stage. But you have this pure, joyful, blissful consciousness. And as Swami Kriyananda said, it is because God is made up of joy, it is the very nature of joy to want to share itself with others. And when there's just the unity, one consciousness, there's no one to share it with. And so God manifests a creation, and he has to do that through some form of delusion, through Maya, but he creates a whole universe of separately seemingly separate entities in order to share his joy with each other. And so that's really what it is. But we get so burdened down. God, as Master describes it, God sends his energy out to the farthest extent of separation. And at the farthest extent, he's mainly asleep. It's all a journey of self-awareness, of becoming increasingly aware of who and what you are. But at the farthest reaches, in the minerals, for instance, or in the atoms, Master says he sleeps, but then he wants more than that. So he creates the plants, and in the plants he begins to dream. And then he still wants more. So he creates the animals, and in the animals he has freedom of movement. He can move around. And the relationship is more, but he still wants more. And so he creates mankind. And with mankind, there is a nervous system and spinal centers that are advanced enough so that we can finally, as human beings, reunite with our own true self. And so God is always in relationship, and we're always in relationship with God. But the farther away from our awareness of that, the more things seem separate. And the more we make choices in our lives that continue that separation, the more difficulties we have. So, as I say, the real secret of harmonious relationships and growing and expanding relationships is to keep working toward the self-awareness that you are an extension of God. And when you can do that, then not only relationships, but everything in life begins to flourish. Your businesses flourish, your health flourishes, everything, because the more we tune in with God, then the more we express God's qualities, and God is perfect. So we begin to express increasing perfection. But the most important thing for most people, the thing that impacts them most emotionally, are their relationships. And so to have good and harmonious, uplifted, serviceful relationships is a great joy. And that's whether you're in a marriage, a partnership, in a family, whatever the circumstances of your life are, you still have to work on having positive relationships. And we'll explore more tonight or this morning for all of you. We'll explore some of the aspects of that.
Yes. First of all, for those of you who haven't ever joined us for an in conversation, we're sitting in our living room. We're sitting at our dining room table right now. And I think many of you know Jyotish is a wonderful artist. And behind us on the wall is a beautiful painting we call God's Boatman, showing Master in a small boat on a stormy sea, holding up a lantern, guiding showing the light out of how to find your way out of the stormy seas of life. And then it's a little
Then
bit,
I'll move.
yeah,
a
then
little bit.
there's a beautiful painting of Divine Mother. That's one of our favorites. That's an original. These two are both originals. And then on the wall next to it is a painting of Krishna that a friend of ours, Guru Priya from Calcutta, gave us, and we enjoy it very much. And then on the table behind us, you see some lilies that for our anniversary, our house was filled with flowers, and some of them have survived. But talking about this subject, relationships, human and divine, I've been rereading Swami Kriyananda's autobiography, The New Path. If you've read it already, read it again. If you haven't read it, enjoy yourself for the first time. But particularly when you read the first part, he had a lot of suffering and unhappiness as a child. He was very ill. His parents sent him away to school when he was 9 years old. He was born in Romania. His parents were American, but they were working in Romania. And how he was at 9 years old, sent away to a boarding school, didn't in Switzerland, didn't speak French, very isolated and alone. And so it went all his life, this feeling of being an outsider, being lonely, trying to fit in, but knowing that to fit in, he had to be somebody that he really wasn't inside. And just this deep, deep yearning to find truth in life, this forever questioning mind, what's real? What's the purpose of all this? And then those of you know who have read it know the story. He finds autobiography of a yogi. And I saw a passage in The New Path that I hadn't ever seen before, or I'd read it, but it struck me with more impact this time, where he says, before he even read the book, just looking at Master's picture on the cover, he said, I felt that he understood me in a way that no one ever had in my life, just looking at his picture. And then, he reads the book, incredible heart-opening experience for him, takes the bus the next day from
He
New
said
York.
he didn't want to be hasty and be impetuous, so he waited a whole day before he took the bus.
Yeah, and then he gets to Los Angeles and goes through all these sort of detours, and finally there he is standing before Master, and Master accepts him as his disciple that first day, the first meeting. But then the thing that's so beautiful, and it's the core of all relationships, as Bharat was saying at the beginning, we learn divine relationships and human reflect back to each other. And the way that Master worked with Swamiji, and by extension, all of his disciples, with so much love, so much care, so much attentiveness to who they were as an individual. And, it had to be different for every single one of his disciples. And what we need to remember that is not over. Master is working. If we say, you are my guru, accept me as your disciple, he's working with you. He's working with me. He's saying, I will untie the knots, your karmic knots, but I'll do it with love. I'll do it with love, not with harshness, not with judgment, not with criticism. And it's so beautiful and then by extension, you think, well, the guru is just God's instrument in this world. And then God, that there's a saint, I think he was French, Saint Jean Vianney, said, if you only knew how much God loved you, you would die with joy. And why don't we remember that? That's really what all of life is about, is to experience how much God loves us. End of story. And then we have people in our lives. We have friends, we have partners, we have children, we have, all the different varieties of human relationships. And we need to remember that if we can try to unlock that key that keeps the door of our heart, with the key, unlock the door of our heart that keeps us protected, that keeps us not feeling safe around people, not trusting people, but just that's what you find in that, seeing how Master related to his disciples, just that incredible openness, which allowed Swami, who had from a young child had guarded his heart because people around him didn't treat him very nicely. And then he didn't have to guard his heart anymore. And so with our friends, with the people in our life, if we can just use them as a little reflection of that divine love, and to understand that, is marriage that important in and of itself? No. Is being a parent, having children, that important in and of itself? No. But what it teaches us about our capacity to love and to get ourselves out of the way and to think of other people before ourselves, that's important. And so it's all a gift. And as Jyotish said at the very beginning of our time together this morning, this Ananda Sangha, all of our children all over the world, our family, our friends throughout the world, who have, and in fact, little side note here, it was so touching as a gift for our anniversary, the people who live at the Ananda Village, who work with the online students from around the world. They asked people if they wanted to send us little messages, and then they typed them up and put them in a beautiful booklet. And we had messages from people we didn't know from all over the world. And it was so touching, so touching. And just to realize that this Ananda Sangha is a family. We're Master's children, and Master is a Prem avatar, an incarnation of divine love, and we are his children, and we are united in that love. So we're just so grateful for Master, for Swami, for each other, and for all of you, because it's all an expression of that divine love.
Thank you.
Okay, they've promised us some questions.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you, first of all, for that wonderful and heartfelt introduction. And one of the things that we hear all the time on the spiritual path as yogis, that we need to see the divine in others. And many a times it's easy to see the divine when people are behaving, so to speak. But what does it actually mean to see the divine in others? And how can we actually practice it? Because again, yes, when they're channeling good qualities, may be easy to see, but also our minds tend to define then that, oh, this is the divine in others. So how do we work with that?
Well, you've given a hint to it in the very way that you asked the question. To not see the divine means that the reactive process is active, good and bad. I like this person, I don't like that person. I can see the divine in those people that I like, but certainly the divine couldn't be inhabiting those people that I react to negatively. And so it starts by the practice of sadhana, which allows us to begin to take control over the reactive process. And just as in meditation, we begin to see the divine in ourselves as our minds and as especially our likes and dislikes begin to become calm. And likewise, outwardly, as our mind becomes more even-minded and cheerful, which is what Master said that we should strive to be, as we become more even-minded and cheerful, and the reactive process is less, then we can see the divine more easily in others. And what might have very much annoyed us about the behavior of someone, maybe we end up being a little bit bemused by it. Oh, look, mentally thinking, oh, look at what this soul is acting like. They're really confused, and we're a little bit, as I say, not irritated, but a little bit bemused, or if the opportunity is there, we want to reach out and help. There was a beautiful story, and I'll end with this and let Devi talk, but we had a very good friend, and she had a fiery temper. And she was an artist. This was when we were starting ashram in San Francisco, the first big ashram. And she was a well-known artist, professor at Berkeley, but she was a very energetic and fiery person. In any case,
a student of this path.
Yeah, student. She was a Kriyaban, student of this path, and a good friend of ours. She told us this story. So she was one morning, she wanted some advice, and there was a man that was a financial advisor to her, but also a friend. And so she called him up, and she just wanted to ask some personal advice, not business related. And he said, why do you call me at work about this? I told you not to call me at work. And he hung up. Well, she, being the reactive person that she was, she immediately picked up the phone and dialed his number again.
This was before cell phones.
Yeah, before cell phones. Dialed his phone again, ready to give him a good piece of her mind, and the line was busy. So 5 minutes later, she called him again. Line was busy. And then she was painting, and so she got involved in her painting, and then she had time pass. And Swami said that there are two ways of overcoming difficulty. It's like difficulty is up here, and either we can wait for that difficulty to lose energy and come down to our level, or we can raise our energy and come up to it. And either way works. Well, in this case, time gradually let her mind settle. And then she began to think, that's not like him. He's usually very kind. I wonder if there's something going wrong in his life. So it was some hours later, she called him back and said, are you okay? The way you reacted this morning was so unlike you. And he almost burst into tears. She could hear it in his voice. He said, I'm having a terrible time. Things are going badly at work. They're going badly in my marriage and with the family. And he said, I'm just really struggling. And they just then chatted. And instead of her asking him for help, she was able to be a channel of help to him. But the point here is that it took her getting out of the reactive mode to be able to behave like that. So the simple answer to your question is, how do we see the divine in other people? We get out of the reactive mode, and then we see the divine both in ourselves and in other people.
And following up on that, how do we get out of the reactive mode? Well, that comes from meditation. There just isn't any other way, because in meditation, we can find the peace and the stillness of our own self, and it becomes more and more enjoyable and more fulfilling and more evident that that's who we are and where we want to be, in that state of peace and detachment that comes from sadhana. And we, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, and Master said he was referring to the practice of Kriya Yoga. Even a little practice of this inward religion will free you from dire fears and colossal suffering. So if we can just to find that peace within ourselves, and then when you go forth from your meditation room, you have that perspective. That's what meditation gives you. It gives you the ability to perceive God in everything, and not just making it up, but to really see. Maybe someone's acting like this man who was upset. Maybe they're acting in a way that isn't very lovable or isn't very attractive, but you see beneath that. And it was so beautiful watching Swamiji, because he I can't ever remember him, even in the worst of circumstances, being in a reactive mode. And when people were criticizing him, I remember one time there was a man who lived at the village in the early days, and he was no, I don't know, he had a lot of ego, let's just put it that way. And then he became very critical of Swami, and he was trying to foment a rebellion. And we don't want Swami to be the leader here. I want to be the leader here, that kind of thing. And Swami didn't get upset. And there was some meeting in town where we were meeting with some government department to get approval for building here. And this man, this opponent of Swami's, appeared and came to this meeting. And Swami just walked up to him so lovingly, and he said, I could be the devil incarnate, but it isn't your problem. Why get so riled up about it? Swami didn't say, what are you trying to do? Don't you know, I'm the one who started this community. Who are you to take it away from me? He was trying to help the man, even though the man was attacking him. And so it makes life, it isn't something you do with your will. It isn't something you kind of have a formula, A, B, C, and then you find how to see God. But it's over time, through the practice of meditation, your perspective on everything changes. And you realize that God is smiling at you, and through the wise and through the foolish.
Thank you. You're talking about how to control those reactions is a way to harmony, really. It reminds me of some funny video that I was saying, a secret for a happy marriage, and is you had to carry duct tape with you. So whenever you see something that, let's say, the husband left the shoes anywhere, so the wife Put a little bit of dapte on her mouth and just
In fact,
put.
tell them what you read today.
I just read, there's just a little quick article. There's a big golf tournament coming up called the Masters, where the top professionals golf. And there's some golfer who has a real problem with anger while he's playing. He said that he's going to play in the Masters, but he's going to tape his mouth shut.
Seriously.
Yeah. So duct tape. I don't know whether he's going to use duct tape, but
You know, speaking of funny things, a friend of ours, I don't think he's watching because he lives in America, but he's an Indian friend who lives in Southern California. He'd said, "Do you know how you make God laugh?" And we said, "No, Arnab. Tell him your plans." That was a good one.
That's a very good one.
Yeah. So, just speaking on like even Jyotish, the story you told about the lady with painting. So I guess a lot of the ways to work maturely with relationships then is to figure out how to change the energy between, when things are heaty or when things aren't going so well. And what advice could you give us? And just tricks, tips without tools or how to change the energy?
Yeah, there are a few things that I could say. First of all, it depends a lot on perspective. If you can broaden your perspective, then the energy changes. Other ways to deal with it, one is just honestly deep breathing. If you're upset, really, if you can take 3 or 4 deep, regular breathing, inhale, hold, exhale to the same amount, just 3 or 4 of those will calm the energy. And once your energy is calmed, then you can get a different perspective and you can deal with things more rationally. But the reactive process happens very quickly. And so what you want to do, Gyanamata, Master's most advanced woman disciple, said you can't always control your first reactions, but you can control what happens after the reaction. And so you might get upset, but then what can you do to stop that from growing and to calm down the energy? Sometimes if you need to, especially in a relationship, an intimate relationship, just say, I'm upset now. Let's talk about this later, and just move away from the situation and get some time. Kind of sometimes going to bed and having a sleep overnight then allows that reactive process to settle down. But the breath and the reactive process are linked together, as is the mind. And so if you can control your breath, that's why Lahiri Mahashaya said Kriya is the answer to every problem, because Kriya controls the reactive process, raises the consciousness, and then you have a different viewpoint.
And several points. One, it was implied in what Jyotish said, but really try to see your life in terms of longer rhythm. So if you're going through a period of disharmony, just think, we have a lifetime together. Let's not dwell on this little period. And that in itself helps you get out of it, because you realize, I don't want to just be caught in the ephemeral. I want to live in eternal things that are eternal, and your love for each other is eternal. So don't get caught up in the little fluctuations on a temporal basis. And then to remember to, this is a beautiful story. The more you keep your consciousness uplifted, the more you can, these little turbulent things just kind of settle down. We had a friend of mine told me this story. She lived here at Ananda Village. She's serving elsewhere now. But at the time, I just happened to mention to her, I won't say the people's names who told me this story, but I said, I just mentioned, oh, Swamiji called us last night to talk about something. And she said, and then she paused and she said, he's never called us. They weren't, real involved with running Ananda. They lived here, but mainly that's why Swami called us. It was about things involved with keeping Ananda strong. And so she said, Swami's never called us. And then she paused and she said, no, he did one time. And then she paused again. She said, we had just had a big fight, my husband and I. And we went to bed and we were very angry at each other. And we woke up and we were very angry at each other. And then the phone rang and it was Swamiji. And he said, hello, I just wanted to thank you both for your wonderful spirit. That was it. Hung up. And they looked at each other and they both burst out crying. And they just said, I'm so sorry. But just that little bit of uplifted energy got them out of that downward spiral, the kind of like I don't know, the vortex of negative energy. And once you start going down that, it's very hard to climb back out. But if you can catch it before you're really sunk in it, then it's easier. But just to remember, if you uplift your consciousness, that's all that happened. He uplifted their consciousness. Did he know they were having a difficult time? Well, yes and no. I think on some level he must have known. And but in any case, when you're really having a hard time, remember the answer is to reach out for higher consciousness.
Thank you. That simple advice of the longer perspective and uplifting our energy, in a time where it's so easy to quit, what we see around and people just to give up and kind of let go or break, but to actually keep a longer perspective in mind can be so helpful, to go through those.
Yeah. And of course, this harmony, we never see them necessarily as blessings, but certainly there are ways for us to learn when there is something to correct. But we hear on the spiritual path and everywhere really that if you see something wrong with the world, it's wrong with you. And certainly having a close relationship perhaps is easier to see wrong things, but even with friends or sometimes with our children, we maybe see faults that they may have, maybe we react to those faults. So the question is like, how do we know when is everything we see in others something that we have to change in ourselves? And obviously in a marriage, maybe different than with friends or guru bhais, what is our responsibility to also help others in changing, or is it always us who have to change?
Well, it's a complex question. Let me talk first about helping others. Basically, the rule of thumb is with adults, don't try to help others unless they ask you to help. Because if they haven't asked you to help, they're probably not open to your helping. And in that case, just try to give them uplifted energy. There was a woman here who was very, very difficult to get along with. And people went to Swami and complained about her behavior. Swami said, I'll talk to her. And we thought Swami was going to give her a good scolding. He called her, invited her over for dinner. They had a nice dinner. He thanked her for everything that she did. And that was his way of talking to her because he knew that she was not at that time open to advice, that she acted that way out of, I don't know, self-disturbance and insecurities. And to criticize her would have just deepened that. So he tried to support her. So that's the rule of thumb with adults, is don't offer advice unless they ask for it. Or if you're in a group, then talk about a subject, but don't make it directed toward them. Swami often did this. He would, if somebody had a problem with anger, for instance, he would look at a person who did not have a problem with anger and talk about how you really needed to control your anger. It hurt you, it hurt the other people, And the person he was looking at kind of was, if they didn't know what he was doing, they would think, gee, do I have a problem with anger? I didn't think I had a problem with anger. But in the meantime, the person with the anger problem is agreeing with Swami. Yes, you should control your anger. Yes, you shouldn't lash out to people. Yes, so Swami diverted, he gave the advice by pretending to give the advice to somebody else. So that's another way of working with it. With children, you have to work with their realities. Too often parents overcorrect children when because they haven't been able to get into their mind frame, their perspective, and they correct them as if they were an adult. And so you have to work to get with, and it's true for everybody. You have to try, if possible, to get into their mindset. And once in their mindset, you can probably feel why they're acting the way they're acting, and then you can find a way to help them.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, really, but I think I can just share with you the conclusion that I've come to in my life is you can't change people. That, Gyanamata said, change no circumstances, change me. Gyanamata was Master's most advanced woman disciple. And so, maybe you're in a situation where someone's acting terribly and you're just being neutral. I mean, it's very clear that they're causing the problem, but you can't change them. But what can you change? You can change the fact that you're reacting to it, if nothing else. And so, and what's the spiritual benefit of changing yourself instead of changing circumstances? More and more you live from your own center, more and more you realize that this world is just God's dream. I can't, he's dreaming it, I can't change it. Just like, how do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans. It's his dream. He's in charge. And so really just to try to live in such a way that you just say, Lord, I will adapt to the circumstances in which I find myself to the best of my ability. I will respond to the people around me if they're wise or they're foolish, to the best with, as I think, from my highest self. So if we try to change the world around us, it's it's like writing in sand. The waves come and they wash it all away. But if we try to stay centered in ourselves, that's where we can make the real changes. And everything that happens to our life, as our beloved Guru said, is for our entertainment and education. So let's try to be entertained and educated by this dream.
The ego has a responsibility to make corrections, but only to itself. That's where the responsibility to make corrections ends. Now, if God wants to work through you to help other people, that's another thing. But that's God making the corrections, not you as an ego reacting because somebody is displeasing you and you thinking you have to fix the problem. There was a writer who wrote the Narnia tales and so on, C.S. Lewis. He said, many people would like to serve God, most of them in an advisory capacity.
Yes, we had to remember these jokes to tell later, actually. That is just so easy to tell other people what they are doing wrong than to identify.
Yes.
And very hard to see. Maybe that gives a hint also to kind of turn it back here, because it's usually easier to, why is it easier to see it there, but not so much with oneself? Or how do you flip that?
We had a good friend, Nayaswamis Ananda, for those of you who knew her, wonderful soul, but she started a practice where if she started criticizing somebody in her mind, and she would say, they have this problem, this problem, this problem, and then she trained herself to say, just like me.
That's actually a great tool to use. Um, so, one question in India which comes up very often now is with aging parents. So, how to kind of develop healthy relationships or have healthy relationships with parents as they're aging, and also as they help them transition in that way without, getting into arguments or trying to change ways or whatever that they have developed.
Well, one of the things that I so respect and admire about the Indian culture is the deep respect that you all have for elders, for parents, and it's much less so in the West, I have to say, unfortunately. But it's not easy to watch uh, people you love begin to diminish physically, mentally. We have some friends that, we've watched go through dementia and Alzheimer's, and, they're not who they used to be. But in fact, we have one very dear friend who has Alzheimer's, and we tried to care for her here, but her needs were more than we could do. She needed medical help as well. So she's in assisted living. But we go to visit her often, and it's so beautiful because is a deep devotee. She's in her late 80s now, but she I asked her recently, I went to visit her, and she comes in and out of clarity. And I asked her, what do you think you're supposed to learn at this stage in your life? And she paused and she said, to let go of everything. And I thought, wow, and that's marvelous. But in relating to people who don't have mental clarity, just to try when you're with them, don't try to relate to their personality, try to relate to their soul nature. And even if it's nonverbal, but just to uh, hold them up in the light. And you can uh, I think people are very much helped that way. And so, with aging parents, they can be demanding, they can be irrational, all those things. Try to be centered in yourself. Try not to get all riled up in emotions. Uh, you know, reactive and all those things we've been talking about. But again, just try to relate to the highest in them. There was a very beautiful, and I'll close with this and then Jyotish can share as well. There was Master had a very wonderful disciple. Her name was Kamala Silva. And she met him when she was a young girl, she and her mother. And she had many, many miraculous experiences with him. She wrote a book called The Flawless Mirror. It's quite inspiring. But at the end of her life, uh, after Ananda was established, she was living in the San Francisco area. She developed Alzheimer's and she had no family to care for her. So Swami said, oh, well, we'll bring her here and we'll care for her. And we had her here for a while. And then at one point, someone said to Swamiji, oh, Swami, it's such a shame that this great soul now, doesn't really remember anything. And Swamiji said, oh, it's just the mind. Her soul is still with Master. So remember that, the mind is not who we are. The mind may become erratic or hostile or demanding, but try to remember your parents, the love and the kindness and the presence of stability in your life that they gave you and relate to that in them.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. There are so many variations on personal relationships, and the parent-child relationship is a particular kind of relationship. If the parents were wise and uplifted, then there would be an easy relationship. But those who aren't, those who still want to feel like they're in a power relationship with their offspring, they can be very difficult. So in those cases, the best thing is just to stay within yourself. We gave some advice to someone who was in a tense situation with some other people, and she didn't want to fight, but we said, you can be strong without having to be in conflict. Think of yourself like a strong tree in the middle of a forest. That tree is very strong, rooted deeply, and complete in itself, but it's surrounded in a forest, but it doesn't have to be in conflict with the rest of the trees. So if you can, with difficult home situations, parents, work, anything, be strong in yourself, but don't feel that you have to fight in order to be strong.
Thank you. And when we talk about balance between East and West, I feel like sometimes this family dynamics is also that needs to be balanced between East and West. One is maybe a little too little. Sometimes here can be a little too much. For example, sometimes parents, even till late age, want to be too involved with the child and what to do with the child. They have, again, although you'd said a little bit, but maybe a little bit more on how to take proper care of a child and let them do their mistakes, or how much should the parent be involved, especially after the child is an adult already.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, we have, most of you know, we have a grown son and 3 grandchildren. He's 48 years old. And it's, I actually find it very curious in myself because there's something I think more in mothers than fathers, where you feel like you constantly have to tell the child what to do and, make sure they're not making mistakes and making the right, finding the right direction. And it's almost like a cellular thing. I don't know where it comes from, but just to the, just like Swami gave the example when he was a young boy and he was teaching other children in the neighborhood how to ride a bike. And first he ran along beside them, holding the handlebars in the seat. And then they got a little more steady. And then he can let go of the seat and then let go of the handlebars and then run alongside and then just cheer them from the side. It's important that parents be able to do that, to be able to cheer their children from the sideline. And just, if they make mistakes, you just say, get up, try it again. But we don't own, no one, even children, no one owes us anything. They don't own us. They do not owe us the anything, that they have to behave in a certain way after they're adults. And we all have our own life to live. And I think as parents, I'm learning this myself, that just to say, I pray for you every day, you have my blessings, but I give you to God, and God, you're really God's child. There's a beautiful book that I read many years ago. It's very popular, called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And in it, it's like a book of poetry, and there's a section on marriage, a section on children and different things. And there was one line in there that always has stuck with me. He said, your children are not your children. They are just God coming through you. And that's really what it is, to have that kind of, not loving them, always loving them, but with detachment. I'm trying my best. Patricia's better at it than I am.
With this one, I am.
That's very helpful. And looking around here, at least at the congregation we have here, many people are not married. And of course, I'm sure in their minds, sometimes it goes the question, should I get a partner? Is it important? Should I do? And if I want to, how do I even go about it, especially now that I'm on the spiritual path?
Well, Again, complicated. First of all, should you marry? If you have a desire to marry, if you have a desire to have a partner, then probably you should. But the very, very, very most important thing to remember is to ask whether a particular relationship will bring you closer to God or not. Because if it won't, ultimately it's going to make you unhappy. The reason you'd get into a relationship is because you want to be happy, you want to be fulfilled. But if it isn't rooted in God, it's going to take you away from that. So that's the first thing. Will a relationship bring me closer to God? And will a relationship with this particular person bring me closer to God? Beyond that, there are arranged marriages in some cultures. There are cultural expectations about relationships and marriage. It gets very complex when interlinked with the cultural or familial expectations. But if you can, reach out to somebody who has really your best interest in mind and has some wisdom and objectivity, and ask them what they think of this relationship. Devi and I live at Ananda Village, and there are quite a number of young people here. And generally speaking, they will ask us or someone else for advice if they're interested in someone, but before they get into any kind of committed relationship. That's the time to ask for advice. Once there's a strong commitment, then it's harder.
I would just add here, if you're thinking of getting in a relationship, don't ask Jyotish and me. We got enough to do.
Yeah, we got enough on our plates.
but
Ask Shamani and Bharat.
yeah, no, but it's good to ask someone who you respect and who has objectivity. But if you're just getting onto the spiritual path as a young person, I think it's very good to give yourself a few years on the spiritual path before you get in a relationship, because you're evolving, you're developing, your soul nature is coming out. And if you get in a relationship too soon, it limits your ability to evolve. I hate to say that, but it's true. And so if you're thinking of getting in a relationship, just say, okay, let me give a year at least to just being on the spiritual path, to meditating, to serving, and then see who I am at the end of that year. And then you'll have a clearer perspective of yourself. Because in the world, I know before I came on the spiritual path, you're just influenced by all sorts of superficial criteria that aren't necessarily in your own highest interest. But once you start meditating, then you start realizing what's important and what you really want in life. It's kind of harsh advice, but I think it's true. Sorry to say.
Yeah, certainly if you're going to get into a relationship, let it start with friendship, not romance.
Thank you. Maybe we have just a couple more questions. We have time for 2 more questions. So maybe on a sort of lighter note, you both have shared some very fun, very beautiful things on the little ways that you've stayed connected throughout the years, and bringing in humor, but also little things you've done. And this is actually a question that somebody here gave of what small everyday acts kept your connection alive, or just any way that you can share.
Well, I'll just say something very funny that happened last weekend when we were celebrating here. I mentioned the story that we would play this little game with each other. We live in an area that has a lot of oak trees, so there's a lot of acorns. And so we had a little acorn, and I would hide it in Jyotish's a pair of shoes that he didn't wear all the time. And then he'd put his foot in and he'd find the acorn. And then he would take that same acorn and hide it in a pocket of a jacket that I didn't use, and then I'd find that. So this would go back and forth for months and months. So the funny thing is, I told that story last weekend, and as we were leaving the temple where the satsang was, I put on my shoe and somebody had put an acorn in it. Somebody who had been listening. And then Jyotish put his, and I said, Jyotish, did you do that? And he said, no, I didn't do it. And then he had an acorn in his pocket. And then everywhere we went, people were putting acorn.
We felt like little squirrels.
So, you know, that's a little story, but the point behind it is make your life fun. Life can grind you down and so much, you know, I have to do this, I have to do that, and I'm not a good devotee, and I have to meditate more, and all these things. But if you can just try to find light, fun, even childlike things that keep your spirits high, it's a lovely additive to life.
Yeah, Devi and I, almost every day we walk together, and we have a beautiful community, so it's relatively easy. But just find things that you enjoy, and the most important thing is to meditate together, because that blends your auras together. And in a blended aura, you'll just naturally find ways to. I have a tendency to tell jokes. We have a tendency to kind of try to put something, or a little game we play, we'll put something in a manner that the other person has to figure out what you're saying. And so you know, it might be something like, instead of asking for a teacup, you'd ask for, where's that vessel, you know, that holds the things from India that we put hot water on, and the other person doesn't know what you're saying. Oh, a teacup. And then that's what you meant all the time, but you're just trying to amuse each other. But every couple will find little ways, or should find little ways.
But the main thing is to consciously bring joy into your life in little ways and big ways. And that's, God is joy. It's one of the aspects of God. And just to find a way to laugh. And we would, when we would go visit, spend time with Swami Kriyananda, we would often bring a little joke to tell him, because then he would laugh, and you know, it's just a way to keep things light.
That's wonderful. And I think many a times, especially as we go on, we forget to have fun. And that's always important, to keep going, that joy. Now,
I just want to say, excuse me 1 minute. I see the screen of Hyderabad, and I think it's Premdas who just keeps adjusting the camera. Hello, Premdas.
Good.
They are on for next month, so they're getting ready with the camera.
Okay, practicing.
Yeah. So just like
Hi, Preeti. We're seeing some of you on the screen now. Nice to see you all.
And of course, before we leave, we will ask everyone to turn on their cameras after the last question. But I suppose that probably for us, the most important relationship we have is with our Guru. And now today is Ram Navami, which is the birth of Lord Ram. And we have his divine romance that happened with Sita. And I believe next week is also some celebration of Hanuman, who is recognized, of course, as being a great devotee. And we have the example of Swamiji with Master, who was always tuning into Master. And because it's the last question, I'm going to put two into one. One is how, obviously, should be the relationship that we had to put the most of our energy in developing? And also, is it possible for us to have that we feel we have a great relationship with Guru, but somehow with people we cannot have any good relationship? Is that possible also? I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah. You know, to take the last question first, since you doubled up on us, yes, of course it's possible to have a relationship with the Guru and not be able to get along with people. Many of these things are just karmic tendencies. The tendencies of a person that was a hermit may feel uncomfortable in company, but ultimately we need to try our best to have good human relationships as well as good relationships with God and Guru. And in terms of deepening our relationship with the Guru, I think just see him with you all the time. Talk to him during the day. Ask, if you're in a quandary, ask him, just like he's silently sitting there. And don't make it formal. Just treat him like your very best wise friend that likes to hang out with you.
Yeah, it's love, the theme that we've been talking about, relationships, human and divine. Really, all of life is divine. It's just God's Leela. And, we have the wonderful stories and avatars from ancient India, Rama and Sita and Krishna, and their lives were not easy. I mean, we know these great epics and these great stories. Their lives were challenging, but Ram and Sita, that's a wonderful example of people enduring what for Dharma, what God gave them, and triumphing in the end. And so, if we can just every one of us has a different story, a different life pattern. Some of us will remain single, some of us will marry, some of us will have children, some of us won't have children, on and on and on, all the variations. But the one relationship that is at the core of it all is the individual soul, the relationship to God, and everything else is just a variation on that theme. So one of the blessings we all have in our life, hi Bhakti, is just this Ananda Sangha, this family in God, this family that I mean, some of you we see, once a year, but the love and the friendship is very strong and it doesn't diminish. And so we thank you, and we hope that for all the centers that are joining with us tonight, just continue the wonderful work of sharing Master's teachings with people and inviting them to be a part of this wonderful, wonderful family in God.